You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
And here's Zany. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. My real name is Lance White, and I am your host. Excuse me. Tonight, my guest is Stephen Thompson. Stephen's life journey is as a seeker of the spiritual path. For the last 20 years, he has been a teacher and guide for many people. He has lectured across the United States and in England on psychic development, the Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, he can correct me when we get him on the air, spiritual practices, and the integration of Western beliefs with Eastern practices. He leads tours and facilitates workshops and retreats around the United States and Peru. Stephen specializes in uncovering the source of mastery within, inner well-being, and self-actualization. Tonight, we'll probably be discussing his new book, or the reissue of his book called The Secret Key, which pertains to developing our innate psychic abilities. So, let's welcome Stephen to the show now. Hi, Stephen. How are you?
I'm great tonight. Thank you for having me on as your guest.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you. You have such a long, your history goes back so far, like so many of us that have been on the spiritual path. Tell us, how did all this begin?
It was, we can always see clearly backwards, right?
Right.
I affectionately think about myself and actually talk a lot about being what I consider to be this sort of freaky little psychic kid. And certainly got myself into my share of trouble because, when we're open and functioning at those levels, the boundaries aren't as clear. And I certainly found myself in some hot water from time to time, knowing things, so to speak, that I shouldn't have known.
Oh.
There's a huge, tradition in my family, mostly on the women's side, who really own this whole part of who they are. I'm not from a standpoint of maybe going out necessarily and doing what I do, but it's a very active process for them. It's a part of their consciousness. And so I think part of that I absorbed. And, when I was in college, a friend of mine gave me a tarot deck, and I just devoured that little book that came with it and really started a very serious study of the tarot then, and went on and went out into the business world, and then when I was about 35 said that I needed to really fully direct my activity in the direction of my spiritual path, and so I left corporate America then, and that was quite a few years ago.
Now, in the dedication to your book, you mentioned the teachings of the Rosicrucian Order. Have you actually been involved with the order for a period of time? I know there's like 33 degrees, something like 33 degrees to these various Masonic and Rosicrucian orders, aren't there?
Well, the Rosicrucian Order is separate and apart from the Masonic traditions, and it is an initiatic tradition. There are not 33 degrees. That is the Mason involvement. And I've actually been a member and studied the Rosicrucian teachings for, I think it's 22 years now.
Oh.
So that's been a very... Yeah, that's been a very... big part of my life. So go ahead.
After you, my dear.
Exactly. Two psychics on the line together, right?
Yeah. Well, we're both psychics, so we'll have to just tune into our psychic abilities to know when to talk and when to stop.
Right. So that has been a big part of my life. I actually had, for about 10 years, when I was living in metropolitan New York, I served as in an administrative capacity for the Rosicrucian Orders. So it's been a really important part of my work and my life. And the reason that I was drawn to the Rosicrucian teachings is that they do hold a very deep mystical tradition to them, but they also teach practical applications to integrate their teachings into your daily life. And I'm guessing you and I are probably in the same age range, and as you'll remember, in the early 70s, there was so much being written, and there was so much coming into the marketplace for the first time and available to us as spiritual people. But what always frustrated me was that I could read books and there was theory in them, but they never gave me the background. They never said how to do that. I remember reading a book that a man wrote on astral projection, and on the last page of the book he said, you know, if you have a problem with this, here's my telephone number. Give me a call.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was, and I really liked that. But the Rosicrucians, the appeal there, of course, over these years has been about, you know, the practical application of the mystical beliefs, and that's very appealing to me.
Well, I did something kind of similar. I was studying Gurdjieff and Ouspensky when I was first started getting really curious about all this stuff. And, of course, they convince you that you can't really learn anything without going into an esoteric school. And I consider all of these different orders, the Masonics, the Rosicrucians, and so on, they're basically esoteric schools where you go to learn concealed information and use it practically. So I joined a Gurdjieff-Ouspensky school in the 70s, and unfortunately it turned into a cult after a few years. So I ended up leaving it, but I had some valuable experiences while I was there. So I do know that, you know, we do get what we get from, you know, our experiences, and it's not all roses.
Right.
So anyway, now you also credit, this is interesting too, you said you have a relationship with Paramahansa Yogananda, which I thought was kind of intriguing. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Again, at the same time and for about the same period of time, I've been studying the Rosicrucian teachings. I've been a practitioner and student of Yogananda. And it's interesting because you know, as you know, with any tradition, most traditions come forward and say, you just need to practice our way, or you need to practice our studies. And so these are, you know, really very different paths. I'm not going to completely say that the Rosicrucian order path is an intellectual path, but to a very large degree it is an intellectual path. And of course, the Yogananda tradition was one that, you know, I'll share the story with you. I was in my late 30s. I was in meditation, and you know, I saw this face, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I don't know who you are. You know, I'm busy here meditating. You need to go away. And to make a very long story short, that ultimately progressed to the place so that I was in a New York City bookstore with a friend of mine, and there was a picture of, you know, or there was the autobiography of a yogi, and on the back was the picture of Yogananda, and, you know, that's when I obviously was able to identify who that was that came to me in my meditative state. And there, again, the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is the worldwide religion behind the teachings of Yogananda, have some very different practical teachings that support our spiritual journey. But, you know, they're very different from the Rosicrucian order, but equally as powerful. So I guess, you know, I would say to you the Rosicrucian order is my head, and the Yogananda part of my work is my heart.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you also do workshops and retreats around the United States and Peru. Are these places sacred sites that you're visiting, or especially in Peru, I would think that would be the case.
That is. Peru's been, to the point that it's almost like a second home. Obviously, we're all concerned right now because I'm sure you know that the rains came and the roads were washed out from Machu Picchu.
Ah, yes.
And that happened a couple of weeks ago, and it's probably going to be another couple of weeks before the train is up and operating again and people are able to access that site. Interestingly enough, there's an incredible shaman who I work with in Peru whose name is Jorge Luis Delgado. And because of all of the, I don't know what I want to say, I guess publicity or all of the focus that's come on 2012, he put together a series of activities that coincide and lead up to and build up to 2012. I'm not sure if you know this, but Machu Picchu is on the same grid line, the same ley line as Mount Shasta.
Oh.
So there's an energetic connection there. And interestingly, one of the things that is actually being planned, and it's for 11/11/2011, is that there's an invitation for anyone to join into some kind of a ceremony or meditation on 11/11/11 somewhere on that ley line.
Ah.
Because in addition to Machu Picchu and Mount Shasta, in between there are other sacred sites.
Oh, interesting. I guess Mount Shasta would be the closest to me. Certainly closer than Machu Picchu.
Right, exactly.
And being in California. And of course, so many people, I think it's Johann Kalaman is saying that the true end date of the Mayan calendar is indeed in November of 2011, that's the actual date that the calendar ends. But I think most of us who are here tonight sharing this space pretty much agree that 2012 is a window, and that we're talking about waves of energy here and consciousness. So, but if you can shed any light on that,
well, I'm really glad. I'm really happy with what you've said, because I think there is a real movement behind this. Somebody actually sent me a cartoon the other day, and it was a picture of a Mayan man coming home to his wife, and he has the calendar in his hands, and he says, I ran out of material. Do you think anybody's going to be upset?
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And again, there is astrological events all the way along leading to 2012. I'll share with you an interesting story. I found this book, and it was written in the 1930s by a well-known mystic. And at that time, he was traveling around Europe, and he actually had intended on being in Egypt on an auspicious date, like 2012, And so he's writing in this book about, we made it to the Great Pyramid, and it's 1936, and this convergence is happening in the sky, and he gets up in his journal the next day, he says, and nothing happened. So, again, I think that we look for these kinds of events. There are some things going on, though. Through your work and as I know through my work, things don't just start today. They have roots, yesterday, last week, month, year, 5 lifetimes ago. So, for things to be popping up, and all of a sudden be of surprise, I think if we think about it, we can certainly trace some activity or some energy that we've created in this lifetime, forward to the particular event that's going on. Mm-hmm. The Peruvian people feel that in 2000 that the cycle started, that they're actually corresponding with 2012. And the Peruvian belief is that a new Pachacuta, which is a cycle of light that's 2,000 years in length, that with 2000 actually that the sun was